It's also live over there. So if someone has any questions on YouTube, you can send it in the live chat. And this session you can also use as a base for further customization and in integration with various like CI/CD pipelines, and just basically get started with your ISC or infrastructure as code journey. But yeah, let's get started with it. Dinesh, would you like to give yourself a quick intro and then share your screen and get on with the session?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi everyone, welcome again. As Kunal said, 2028. It seems like it's been flying around these meetups, so it's great to see so many people that are here to join us as well. So the reason kind of we're going down this route, I'll explain in a few slides. I promise it won't be death by slides, it'll just be one or two, but I think if I get share my screen and jump over to here, I've got to the end of the slides because obviously I was demo testing to make sure that it's all working. A little bit about me. So CTO at Civo, but I think there have been a lot of stuff around me. So lots of experience doing DevOps and doing architecture. Recently moved over to Civo about 2 years ago and have building the platform. And kind of one of my passions there, building systems at scale, is really important and really, really key to me, of building manageable systems at scale and repeatable systems. And some of the things that I'm going to share with you today are around that idea and setting you on a good foundation as you grow and add scale to your applications. So just kind of going about cluster deployment of where most people start their journey, and it's usually with a CLI or a GUI where you're point and clicking and you're getting up a cluster really, really quickly. And it's amazing to do. I mean, it's really, really fast for development. You can get up and running, you can start playing with things. I think one of the other things that we do at Civo is the marketplace that allows you to get applications online really, really quickly. So if you wanted to, get started playing with Nginx, or you wanted to get started with Prometheus, you can just click a couple of buttons and it's ready to go. However, I think when you start scaling that over and moving over to a production system, there's a whole set of different requirements that this fast and loose style doesn't really work with. So when you move over to production, getting a repeatable deployment process is really, really important. And by that, I mean that it gives you the same results every time. So whether you deploy your application today and all of the tools around your application today, or you do it in 2 months' time, it's really, really important that exactly, or as close to exactly, the same cluster gets deployed and the same resources. And I think that's where going with a marketplace or even doing a Helm install latest on something like Nginx can get you into trouble. Because during today and 2 months' time, there could be upstream changes to the Helm values, or even an image of an ingress controller that means that you're not getting the same results. And in production, that's a problem, because you're normally redeploying after something's gone wrong and you need to go back to a known good state. And the faster that you can do that, the more time you get to spend doing other work, because you're ready to go and you're back up and running. So that's where I think the other things that I've listed down here about being automated, about making sure that the process is accountable. And by that, I mean that as you make changes and you say you upgrade Helm, or you upgrade Nginx from version 1 to version 2, you know who has done it, you know when the change is done. And using an automated process, you're also able to roll back and go back to a known good state. So that's where tools like Terraform come in, which is infrastructure as code. So by that, you're able to define something in Git and then apply it to a cloud provider, Civo included, but other clouds as well. And it provisions both infrastructure, and then you can also provision the applications running inside your infrastructure. So the idea being that as you're working on the application, and I keep going back to this Nginx ingress, so say that you need to get it running on a different port. The way you do that is you don't connect kubectl to a cluster, is you make a change inside your Git repo, you rerun Terraform, and it makes the change for you. Which means now 2 months down the line, you've made a load of changes to your infrastructure. You then need to revert for some reason, or you need to deploy it maybe to testing or staging to test something else out. You can take your infrastructure as code repo, apply it to something new, and you get the same results that you're running in production that you can then use to test. And that's what Terraform is really, really good for. One of the things, though, is with Terraform is you don't kind of know where to start. So that's why we've built this template. And it's actually something that we've started using and we had internally in Civo for a long time. So when we are putting something out into production, we normally put it on a dev cluster first, and that dev cluster is pretty much the same every time. And we've had users basically copy paste Terraform files from one repo to another. But that gets you into some problems, as we can kind of get pollution of environment variables and things like that. So we went down this route of creating a Git template that can be used as a starting point in your kind of cluster. We wanted to give you some same defaults, some same things that you can customize with, and then you can start adding on top of that. So this is an overview of the infrastructure that we're going to get provisioned. And one thing that's really, really nice about using a template is it's really, really quick and it's really, really easy to document. So we will go ahead and we'll provision a cluster, and we'll put two firewalls actually in front of it. So we'll have one firewall to control access to our API, and another firewall for actually controlling ingress to services that you might be running inside the cluster. This allows you to then start adding firewall rules in, so that if you're behind a VPN or you're behind a static IP, or you're working inside like a corporate environment where you've got that static infrastructure, you can start customizing what has access to the Kubernetes API and leaving the ingress into the cluster for other traffic with a different set of rules. We'll then inside the cluster, we'll actually do a Helm release of traffic and a quick Nginx deployment, just an example of what you can do with Terraform and where you can start taking the customization onwards. So if we swap over, so this is the Git repo that is there. It's a public template repo, and that's the kind of important thing that is key to know. We've got a quick getting started guide in here, which we'll basically follow and move along with. So I'll click this use this template button, and we'll just do demo. And what GitHub will do now is it will clone that, but rather than kind of taking some as it being as a fork. So when we kind of list here, it's not actually a fork, and it's not a fork of the other one. It's a completely new repo, but it just notes that it's been generated from the Terraform template. So we'll go over here and we will check that out. Hopefully that's big enough for everyone to see.
Looks good.
Let me just remove my old one and I will reclone that out. And we've got in here some Terraform files and some example kind of files as well for variables to set up. So the one thing that you need to do is you need to provide your Civo token. So in the README, it tells you to copy this file from tfvars.example to tfvars and put your Civo token into this file. What I've got is my token sitting in the directory above. So I'll just pull it in here for the demo, but you can get this token from the Civo UI as you go through. And what we've done as well, so git status, I'll try and avoid using my shortcuts, but this is what I'm talking about when we're saying sensible defaults. What we don't want to do is start committing back our credentials to a Git repo. So the git ignore file here has already been set up to ignore the values of the tfvars. So you're less likely to put your credentials into the Git repo and push it out. So the next thing, according to the README, is to do a Terraform init. So this goes through and it pulls all of the dependencies, all of the other providers to get the resources configured, and it will pull them locally. So I've got a copy. So we can see here we're using the Kubernetes provider, the Civo provider, the HashiCorp local, and the HashiCorp Helm providers. And this is allowing us to interact with those resources. So what I'll do, I'll run through each of the resources in a minute, and we'll kind of go through how everything's provisioned. But just to kind of kick things off and we can kind of see where we are, we'll just do a Terraform apply. And we can see here that it says we've got 9 things to add, 0 to change, and 0 to destroy. So this now has gone off and it's talked to Civo, and we can see in the UI that it's now provisioning out our template cluster. And this is doing everything that we need in the background. It's configured those two firewalls. It's put the rules in place for each of them, and it's getting that all up and running. We come back to here, we can see that the cluster's still creating. So the way Terraform works as well, it knows what it needs to create at whatever time. So it knows that here it needs to create the firewalls before it then goes and creates the cluster. So it's really, really nice that you get some kind of control over dependencies. So as you're putting more complex applications together, a common example is cert manager is a requirement before you put an ingress controller or your application in. So you can put dependencies in place with Terraform so that it does that along the way automatically for you.
Speaking of infrastructure as code, so we're using Terraform, but it's more dependent. Like it's a lot more code dependent, and some folks may think that you need to be an expert at coding when you're working with the infrastructure as code tools. Does this provide like a little bit of a language dependency for folks who want to get started?
So I think that the way you need to define stuff is really, really clear. So it's kind of, I can't remember the exact terminology for what it is, but it's their own language for it. But
domain specific language.
It's not a specific. It's not like Go. It's not Ruby. Okay. It's nothing like that. So it's a specific format that you have to define stuff. So if you're used to YAML or TOML or something like that, it's very, very similar to that. So here, for example, is the definition of a cluster. And we can see here that we give a name that's a variable. We're pulling in a firewall ID, and then we're also pulling a node count and a size as variables. So you've got to have a little bit of knowledge of coding. It kind of assumes that you knows what variables are and that sort of thing. But it's sort of that you should be able to kind of pick it up very, very quickly. I think if we go into the firewall, for example, for our cluster, again, hopefully as you read through this, you get an idea for what it's trying to do out of the gate. So we've got a name, and we're using that same variable there as well. So what this allows us to do is we've got another file in here that we've called IO for input output. And this is where you can start doing that customization. So we put in here that the name prefix is tf template hyphen. And when we come over here, we can see that that variable has been used to be tf template hyphen cluster. And when we go over into the firewalls, we will see that there are two firewalls that have been created, a tf template firewall and a tf template firewall ingress. If I were to go through and change this to be migrate my awesome application, that would then get pushed prepended in front of cluster and firewall. And that's kind of some of the repeatability that you get. So the other variables that we're listing here is the size of the nodes that you want. So if you wanted to start off with the small or something like that, you can go ahead. And we're adding in descriptions of what they do. So you can get the sizes that are available by running this Civo size list command. Again, there's some prior knowledge that we assume, which is that you've got the Civo CLI downloaded and you've got your API keys, but kind of those are covered elsewhere. And if you're starting down this journey, then you should have some knowledge of how to use a cluster already and what you need to be provisioning.
Speaking of which, if you don't, check out Civo Academy. I'll leave those in the links in the YouTube flex. So I say YouTube, leave it in the description. No, I leave it in the chat. Yeah.
So one of the things that we do with this as well, and you're free to kind of once you've cloned this, you can start customizing this and changing it as you need. So we, by default here, we just pop out the kubeconfig for the cluster into the local repo as a kubeconfig file, which means that I can start interacting with the cluster. So it's a brand new cluster. We can see it's been up for 2 minutes 47 seconds, 2 minutes 50 seconds. And we actually specified no applications to install. But if we get all of the pods in here, we can see that Trafic and Nginx have been running. And these are what we've defined in a couple of other resources that we've got here. So we've got helm ingress traffic. So here we can start now pulling out that we want to get a helm release. We're calling it traffic, and it's in the traffic namespace. So if we do a helm list-a, if I connect to the right, okay, connect to the right cluster. It's connected to one of my dev clusters. So we can see here that we've got traffic that is installed in the traffic namespace, and that has been defined inside our Terraform config that's gone through and automatically connected to the cluster after it's up and running and got it installed. Here we can also see about how we can customize Helm to now use the Civo firewall that we created to control ingress. So we are getting the firewall ID from here. There's a firewall object here, and we're getting that ID and we're passing it into the service for traffic. So if we get that firewall ID has already been kind of pushed in here for us automatically. So we're getting some sort of automation, we're getting some reuse of things already out of the box for free with this. So what this allows us to do as well, we've got the IP address of that. So if we come into here, we should get a page not found. That's default because we've not created any ingresses or anything under this IP address. So getting a 404 in this instance is absolutely expected. What we can do is we can now actually edit that firewall for the ingress. Oh, nope, sorry. What we can do, we can edit the variable that the ingress firewall is using for web access here. So currently 000/0 is saying that we can connect on the web port from anywhere. For this demo, I will just change it to 8.8.8. So, if it's DNS that you're connecting from, you can get access to this cluster, but if not, you can't. And we'll do a Terraform apply again. And now, rather than it saying that there are 9 things to add, it should say that there is one thing to update, one thing to add, one thing to update. I think this is just the deployment, and it's the second time it applies, but it's not going to make any changes. But here you can see that the following action of removing allow all and adding in only access from 888, I need to type yes rather than just press enter, is the change that it's going to make. So it's destroyed the rule and it's now created the rule. So if we come here, let's just close that page, grab that IP address again. So it's easier to get it here. So now if we open this page, it won't actually start up. It won't get anything. We've dropped access to it. And another way of checking that is we can just use curl as well to see here that it's trying to connect, but the firewall is not letting us access it. So we can undo that change by changing this back to 000. Running that apply again. This time, hopefully it will just say the one change and the deployment is fine. Yeah. So yeah, it's going to remove 888 and add in 0, which is done. So now when we come back here and we load the page, we get that 404 again. And again, shown with curl, we now just get some output coming back through. So the other thing that I wanted to show and that we've got in here is an example of a deployment for Nginx. So we can see with Terraform, as well as managing Helm charts and managing firewall rules, we can also start managing Kubernetes resources directly. So this is a Kubernetes deployment. We called it Nginx that lives in the default namespace. So if we come back here, get pods, we'll see that there's an Nginx pod that is running that Terraform has automatically deployed to the cluster. I guess, Kunal, before I go back to the slides, are there any questions? Is there anything potentially anyone wants to see again or in more detail?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I don't see that. But there's one thing you mentioned in the beginning about state. So can you tell us a little bit more about, because when you talk about infrastructure as code, I was doing a Twitter space as well. There was this topic brought up regarding drift. How do you fix that? Yeah.
Absolutely. So what this allows us to do is say that we've got a user that's coming in here. Let's go back to that example where we've blocked access to the cluster. So we put in here the 8.8.8.8/2, and we'll apply that. So we're in a position again where we've purposefully restricted access to Traefik. Now there's another user in the company that's come along and gone, hang on a minute, this is broken. They'll go in the UI and look at the rules for the firewall and go, oh look, this port 80, only on 888, that's the reason why I can't get access. So I'll go through and I will add in a rule. I'll delete this rule. I'll add in a new rule from 80 to 80 to allow, and I'll add that in. So this is the example of drift. So that web page is now accessible again, but it shouldn't be. What we can do is we can come back to Terraform, and when we say Terraform apply, this will spot that the rule doesn't exist. So we can go through and apply that. And actually, potentially, this is something that we need to look at Civo, because it's not spotted that there are an additional rule in place now. So I think we can take that away. But Terraform has now come back and it's put that rule in. And I guess we need to work out that there's an additional rule in here and come in and delete that with Terraform. But we can get that looked at. So now it's blocked in and we can't get access anymore. Does that kind of answer the question about state and drift, Kunal?
Yeah, I think so. Can you also talk a little bit more about the security assessment when it comes to infrastructure tools?
Yeah, one of the nice things about that when you're looking at security is you've got that change that I've made. What I should be doing, and as you kind of go through your journey, is rather than me doing a Terraform apply, what I should be doing is doing a git add on this, doing a git diff, saying, okay, what I'm doing is I'm restricting access. So I'll do a git commit ingress firewall restrict access, and I will push that back to so I'll push that back. So now that change is listed here as ingress firewall restricting access. And the next step with this is to now start putting in CI pipelines so that it gets automatically deployed, or go through some sort of merge request process where rather than me applying that change directly and just going onto the main branch and being pushed out, is you can do an assessment of the change, what's going to happen. Do an assessment there of, is this a security thing to do? Do we want to restrict access or not? And push that through. The other side of the thing is also from audit. All of your code, all of your infrastructure is now defined here. So if it comes to an audit, it's very, very easy for you to give someone all of these files and say, look, this is exactly what our infrastructure looks like.
Cool. Just one last thing, since we're talking about Terraform files, where are you keeping the secrets, and do you have any practices for that? Because that can be, how do you deal with secrets, when it comes to infrastructure as code? Yeah. So, especially from a security point of view as well.
Yeah, I think that's something to consider, because there is a state file here that could store those secrets in it. So like I was very, very careful with that TF-vars file, that that API key that I've got is an example of one of these secrets. Not necessarily that gets deployed, but is really important for applying and making changes. So not storing that in part of the repo, and what you can do is you can inject that as an environment variable into CI jobs, and then you're just going through your CI management for variables. So if you've got something like Vault, or you're working with a provider that has secret management, you could pull that out of the cloud provider and push it in. And that's the same with other variables as well. So the general advice I would give is pull things in as TF vars and then inject them into the kind of Terraform deployment as you go through, or alternatively have a real think about offloading that to something that's in cluster. So can your deployment files, can your Helm charts, can your pods or something pull those secrets in on startup from somewhere that's secure and that you know about?
Thanks for sharing, Dinesh. We can move forward.
Okay, great.
Oh, there's one more question. Gaurav is asking, how can we manage multiple environments prod testing using Terraform? I've seen a few tutorials where they mention about workspace. Is it recommended to use workspace in projects, or there are any other options?
So the other project I think that we use internally is Terra Grunt at the moment. And that allows you to have a set of variables that you use for staging and a set of variables that you can use for production. It's kind of a more advanced use case because you create a Terraform repository or a Terraform Git repo that has your standard deployment. And then you have another repo, is how we do this, which has got your staging and production environment variables. And you use Terra Grunt to apply Terraform with a particular variable. If that's something of interest, we can definitely do another session on that and start going down how you do multiple environment management and how that all works, and a little example set up. And if it's also something that the community would like a sample for, we're happy to do a template of, we've got Terraform over here, this is Terra Grunt, and the two work together to then give you that kickoff point. Just come back to the slides. So I guess we've got this template at the moment. It's something that we're releasing out for everyone to use now. So what we'd like to see is people to start using it and start getting feedback on what people would like to see as examples in here, or if there are any other common resources that people would like to be added. So if you find that on every cluster that you launch, you're putting Cert Manager into it, it's probably something that we'd accept to pull a PR to right, Cert Manager gets installed by default, or Prometheus. The other thing as well that I think personally I'm a little testing mission at the moment is I've got a branch at the moment of testing stuff with TerraTest. So this is TerraTest is a project where you can write Go tests for your infrastructure. And the idea being is that the test will run Terraform, create some real resources, and then you can run some tests to make sure that what's being created has actually been created. So this is kind of where we're wanting the project to go, but at being community focused and community led, if you want anything else from this, then kind of get in touch, let us know, either with a GitHub issue or through the community. So I've kind of, left the link up in here for where you can get it, where you can clone it or create a project from it, and get started. So I think Academy, Kunal, you mentioned there, I was listed as something as well, that if you kind of, if some of this stuff was maybe a bit too far down the journey, then start using Academy there, and it will get you to the point where you can then apply some of the things we've talked about today and push forward.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Dinesh. There's one more question. Does using environment variables for storing secrets causes any problems in other environments? Is there an alternative way to store secrets?
It depends answer. I think when you're getting started, it's the quickest way when you're in dev and test, but definitely look at something like Vault to store secrets and start pulling secrets out. It's not something that I think as a community we're very good at giving an easy answer, because running something like Vault is difficult. Even if you go to kind of other cloud providers, it's a very challenging, costly thing to put your secret somewhere safe, and then also put the infrastructure in place to pull the secret out safely, use it, and push it out. So kind of, and it depends, and it's also not an easily solved problem for an end user to consume.
Amazing. I have one question, like where do you think the whole infrastructure as code thing is headed? Because now we talk about, we have a Pulumi provider as well, right? So you're like, okay, Kunal, make these 2 clusters, this much resources or whatever. But if you want to add some conditions to it, like if this, then make this, else do this, Pulumi can help with that, right? And it offers so many languages or whatever. But where do you think we are like headed? And we talked a lot about like the limitations part. So what are something that you're really like excited about, or any thoughts about the future?
I think that there are two schools of thought, I think, with infrastructure code or just managing infrastructure. So you've got one camp that is apply on a human pressing a button, right? So something like a CD pipeline. I think I don't know if Pulumi has the sort of sync on demand. I know Argo has that. It shows you the changes that have been made, and then you can click sync and you can run it there and then in front of you. And there's the other school of apply just whenever you make a Git change or whenever there is something out of sync, and then applying that. And I think that's going to be the differentiator of where things are going. Of a lot of people running production systems at scale, I think at the moment, are on the side of, I want a human at least in front of a computer pressing the apply button, because if it breaks, then I am there to fix it. And even things like Pulumi and Crossplane and Terraform, they allow you to do that. What I think we as an industry need to move to is the other side of apply always and continuously apply, which is a whole new set of problems, because I think it's also then about the rollback and the identification of problems. So moving on from the simple things we've talked about today, but if you are managing an application and you're able to tie that in with something like Prometheus, and you do a deployment, and a developer does a commit, it pushes all the way through, does a deployment, you see suddenly a spike of errors from Prometheus for your application. You want this tool over here that's automatically applying that to realize that, and then roll back the application to the previous version, raise a Git issue to say, so-and-so developer made this change, it went out to production, I saw a spike in 500 errors, so I rolled it back, here are the example of the logs. That's kind of where I would like to see us going, and it's a completely different paradigm. It still relies on infrastructure as code, but it is now a small part of a larger puzzle, because take the example there of firewall rules being applied, of suddenly you make an infrastructure as code change to change your firewall rule, and your monitoring goes, well, I was seeing 100 requests a second, that's dropped down to 0. It's probably that last commit that I applied. I'm going to revert it and say, what silly person changed this, and raise an issue, and then you can go off and fix it, right? So it becomes a smaller part of a wider thing about kind of automation and feeding back systems.
Yeah, totally agree. And it's one of the ways for how we manage like the complexity in the form of code. So obviously there's infrastructure as code, and there's like config management, containers, and CI/CD, and policies, and so many other things, right? Orchestrators, when we talk about Kubernetes. So I think these things are complex so that the applications can be simple. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, cool. There's one question in the, two now. So there's one question here. What are the advantages of Terraform on Civo rather than other cloud platforms? Any specific tasks like callbacks, etc.?
So I think the one of the things about the Civo provider is that it's really, really simple if you compare it to others. That the number of lines of code that you need to get a cluster up and running with firewalls is a lot smaller than with some of the other providers. So that's really, really neat, and I think something that we're going for. I don't think we have callbacks in there, but again, if it's something that the community are wanting us to do, we can do that and start putting that in there. But I think the biggest win for us is that simplicity and the few number of lines of code you need to do to get up and running. And hopefully stuff like this as well that we're providing and we're maintaining also allows you to get up and running a lot faster.
Amazing. Well, thanks for sharing, Dinesh. We answered all the questions, and thanks everyone else for watching as well. It's being recorded. You can watch it again on YouTube. I've linked all the things that we talked about in the chat, so you can check it out. But yeah, have a good day and a good night from where you were joining, and do check out the Civo Academy to learn about K8s and more. And we'll see you in the next one.